Commander Lyra Chen had spent 15 years watching the stars from Vigil 7, a small defense station floating at the edge of human space. She had seen comets burn across the darkness. She had watched trade ships come and go like fireflies. She had even witnessed 2 small wars between alien species who forgot that peace was easier than death. But nothing in her long career had prepared her for this night. The alarm started screaming at exactly 3 in the morning. Station time. Lyra jumped from her bed and ran to the control room, her heart pounding against her chest. Her crew was already there, staring at their screens with faces as white as snow. "What is it?" Lyra demanded. Her second officer, a young man named Marcus, pointed at the main display with a shaking hand. "The boundary, Commander. Something is coming through the boundary." Lyra felt her blood turn cold. The boundary was the great wall of energy that surrounded the known universe. Every species in the galaxy knew about it. Every species had tried to cross it. And every species had failed. Ships that touched the boundary simply disappeared, erased from existence like words wiped from a page. 300 years ago, humanity had sent their greatest ship to attempt the crossing. The ESV Prometheus Rising carried 12,000 brave colonists who believed they could succeed where all others had failed. They touched the boundary and vanished. No signal, no wreckage, nothing. Humanity mourned them as lost forever. Now something was pushing through that impossible wall. Lyra watched her screen as the boundary began to change. The shimmering energy twisted and folded like fabric being pulled apart by invisible hands. A shape emerged from the light, slowly at first, then faster. It was a ship. But it was not like any ship Lyra had ever seen. The hull seemed to exist in too many places at once. Looking at it made her eyes water and her head ache. The metal appeared to breathe, expanding and contracting like the chest of a sleeping giant. Strange symbols crawled across its surface, glowing with soft light that came from nowhere. "That is not possible," Marcus whispered. But Lyra recognized the basic shape beneath all the strangeness. She recognized the curved bow and the wide engine section. She recognized the name written in letters that shifted between human script and something older than any language. Prometheus Rising, she breathed. It came back. Within 1 hour, the news had spread across the galaxy. The Valori Dominion dispatched 17 warships. The Crystalline Mines sent their fastest science vessels. The ancient Orith, who rarely left their homeworld, launched a fleet for the first time in 10,000 years. Every major species wanted to see the impossible ship that had returned from beyond existence. Lyra sent message after message to the strange vessel. She tried every communication channel known to humanity. She used old codes and new protocols. Nothing worked. The Prometheus Rising drifted in silence, ignoring every signal from every species. The alien fleets grew restless. The Valerie commander sent threats. The Crystalline Mines offered to trade entire planets for a single word from the ship. The Orith simply watched with eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars. Then, on the 3rd day, Lyra tried one last thing. She recorded a simple message in her own voice, speaking not as a commander, but as a human being. "This is Lyra Chen of Earth. I do not speak for governments or fleets. I speak for myself. We have waited 300 years for you. We never forgot you. Please, if you can hear me, let us know you are alive." The response came instantly. A voice filled the control room. It was human. It was calm, and it carried a weight that made everyone in the room feel very small. "We hear you, Lyra Chen of Earth. We have returned. And we bring proof that the universe is not what anyone believed." The alien fleets erupted in chaos. Transmissions flew back and forth as species argued about what to do. Some demanded the ship be destroyed before it could share whatever dangerous knowledge it carried. Others insisted on peaceful contact. A few suggested running away as fast as possible. But the Prometheus Rising ignored them all. It only spoke to Lyra. "You must come aboard," the voice said. "You must see what we have become. Only then will you understand why we returned." Lyra looked at her crew. She saw fear in their eyes, but also hope. For 3 centuries, humans had wondered what happened to their lost ship. Now the answer waited just a few kilometers away. "I am coming," Lyra said into her communicator. She took a small shuttle and flew toward the impossible vessel. As she got closer, the strangeness of the Prometheus rising became even more clear. The ship seemed bigger on some sides than others. Windows showed rooms that could not exist in the space available. Light bent around the hull in ways that broke every law of physics. A hangar door opened without any visible mechanism. Lyra flew inside and landed on a floor that felt both solid and somehow temporary, as if it could disappear at any moment if the ship chose to let it. People were waiting for her. They looked human. They wore simple clothes and carried no weapons. But something about them was different. Their movements were too smooth. Their eyes held a calmness that went deeper than peace. They looked at Lyra the way a parent looks at a child. With love and patience and ancient understanding, a woman stepped forward. She appeared to be about 60 years old, with silver hair and dark skin. But Lyra had studied the old records. She knew this face from pictures taken 300 years ago. "Captain Elena Vasquez," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "You were 30 years old when you left," Elena smiled. "Time works differently beyond the boundary. For us, only 30 years have passed. We watched our own children grow and have children of their own, but we did not age as we should have." "What happened to you out there?" Lyra asked. Elena took Lyra's hands in her own. Her grip was warm and gentle, but Lyra felt something else beneath the touch. Power, vast and quiet and patient. "We found the truth about reality," Elena said. "Beyond the boundary, there is no empty void. There is the framework, the code upon which all existence is written. Every star, every planet, every living thing is a sentence in a book without end. And we learned to read that book, Lyra. We learned to write in it." Lyra's mind struggled to understand. "You mean you can change reality itself?" "We mean that reality is not a wall," Elena said. "It is a door, and humanity has finally learned how to open it." Outside the ship, alien fleets waited with weapons ready. Governments prepared for war. Ancient species feared what they did not understand. But inside the Prometheus rising, Lyra Chen stood face to face with what humanity had become. And she knew with terrible certainty that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The ghost ship had come home, and it had brought something far more dangerous than weapons or technology. It had brought the power to remake existence itself. Ambassador Kethver of the Valori Dominion had lived for 9,000 years. He had watched empires rise and fall like waves upon a shore. He had survived 3 galaxy-wide wars and witnessed the death of 2 sons. And all that time, nothing had ever made him feel afraid, until he stepped aboard the Prometheus Rising. The Galactic Concord had demanded a meeting. Representatives from every major species would board the human ship together, observe what the colonists had become, and decide what to do about it. Kethver led the delegation because the Valore considered themselves the wisest and oldest of the advanced species. They believed they could handle any truth. No matter how strange, they were wrong. The humans who greeted them looked normal at first glance. They wore simple clothes and smiled with warm expressions. But Kethver had not survived 9,000 years by trusting what he saw on the surface. He watched closely, and the more he watched, the more unsettled he became. The humans moved with perfect grace. Not one of them stumbled or hesitated. Their eyes tracked everything at once, seeing details that should have been invisible. And sometimes, just for a moment, light flickered behind those eyes that did not come from any lamp or star. Children ran through the corridors, laughing and playing games. But these children made Kethver the most nervous of all. They had been born beyond the boundary, in a place that should not exist. What had that strange realm done to their growing minds? Captain Elena Vasquez led the delegation to a large meeting hall. The room should not have fit inside the ship based on its outer dimensions. But Kethver had already learned not to trust normal rules around these humans. "Thank you all for coming," Elena said. Her voice was calm and kind, like a grandmother telling stories to her descendants. "I know you have many questions. I know you have many fears. Both are reasonable." A crystalline mind named Prism 7 spoke first. The crystalline minds were beings of living crystal who valued knowledge above all things. They had spent millions of years collecting information from across the galaxy. "We demand proof of your claims," Prism 7 said. "You say you can read and write the code of reality. Show us." Alina nodded. She turned to a young girl standing nearby. The child appeared to be about 8 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes that held too much wisdom for her age. "This is my granddaughter, Mira," Alina said. "She was born in the framework, in the space beyond the boundary. She has never known the limits that the rest of us had to unlearn." Mira stepped forward. She looked at the alien delegation without fear or pride. She simply looked at them with the patience of someone who had all the time in the universe. "What would you like to see?" Mira asked. Kethfer found his voice. "Create something, anything. Show us this power you claim to possess." Mira raised her small hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a flower began to grow from her palm. Not sprouting from a seed, not teleported from somewhere else. The flower simply came into being, atom by atom, petal by petal. It grew and bloomed in seconds. It's beautiful and perfect and impossible. But that was not what made the delegation gasp. As the flower grew, they could see the process happening. Tiny symbols flickered around Mira's hand, characters from a language older than any species present. Reality itself seemed to open like a book, and Mira's will wrote new sentences upon its pages. "This flower did not exist 5 seconds ago," Elena explained. "Now it has a history. It has DNA. If you plant its seeds, they will grow." Myra did not just create an object. She wrote it into the story of the universe as if it had always been there. The Orith Elder, a being so old that even Kethber felt young beside it, spoke for the first time. Its voice was like wind through ancient trees. "You have touched the foundation," the Elder said. "You have done what we forbade ourselves from ever doing again." Elena turned to face the Orith, with surprise in her eyes. "You know about the framework?" "We knew. Long ago in the youth of our species, we touched it once. The experience nearly destroyed us. We chose to forget, to bury the knowledge, to pretend the boundary could never be crossed." The Elder's voice grew heavy with grief. "We thought we were protecting the galaxy from a terrible burden." "What burden?" Lyra asked. She had been standing quietly, watching everything with wide eyes. Before the Elder could answer, Alina spoke. "The burden of choice. When you can rewrite reality, every decision becomes infinite. Should this star exist? Should this species have evolved? Should death be permanent?" These questions nearly drove the first humans who touched the framework mad. Dr. Samuel Okonkwo, the ship's chief physicist, stepped forward. He was a tall man with tired eyes that had seen too much. "We lost 400 people learning the limits of this power," Samuel said. "Good people who tried to make themselves perfect. They removed their flaws, increased their intelligence, extended their awareness. They became more and more reaching for total understanding. And what happened to them?" Kethfer asked. "They became everything," Samuel replied. "Which means they became nothing. When you remove all boundaries, all definitions, you stop being a distinct thing. You dissolve into the infinite. They simply cease to exist as individuals." Silence filled the room. The alien delegation looked at each other with new understanding. This was not simply a matter of power. This was a matter of wisdom, of knowing when not to use abilities that could unmake the self. "We did not return with a weapon," Alina said. "We returned with a responsibility. The universe has rules for a reason. Limits exist to make meaning possible. We learned this truth through loss and pain and centuries of careful thought." Prism 7's crystalline body flickered with agitated light. "Then what do you intend to do with this knowledge? Will you keep it secret? Will you share it? Will you use it to rule over lesser species?" Alina smiled. And for a moment, she looked exactly like the young captain who had left Earth 3 centuries ago, full of hope and courage. "We intend to have a conversation," she said, "with all of you, because this decision is too important for one species to make alone. What we learned belongs to everyone who thinks and dreams and wonders about the nature of existence. We are not gods, and we do not wish to be. We are just humans who walked a little further than anyone expected. Mira released the flower she had created. It floated down to the floor, real and solid and impossible. The framework is patient, the child said in a voice older than her years. It has waited since the beginning of time for someone to learn its language. Now that we have, we can choose what to say. Choose carefully. Words written in the code of reality last forever. Kethfer looked at the flower on the floor. He looked at the child who had made it from nothing. He looked at the humans who had touched the edge of infinity and returned with wisdom, instead of madness. For the first time in 9,000 years, the old ambassador felt something he had forgotten long ago. He felt hope, and beneath that hope, just a small whisper, he felt the beginning of fear. Not fear of what humans would do with this power, but fear of what his own species might do if they ever held such might in their hands. The meeting had only begun, and already the galaxy would never be the same. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every planet, every station, every ship with a communication system heard the same impossible story. Humans had returned from beyond the boundary. Humans had learned to read and write the code of reality. Humans could create and destroy with nothing more than thought and will. Fear followed the news like a shadow follows a flame. On the Valori homeworld, crowds gathered in the great squares to demand action. They had ruled the galactic concord for 100,000 years. They had built their empire on the belief that they were the most advanced, the most wise, the most powerful. Now a young species barely 10,000 years old had leaped past them in a single voyage. The crystalline minds retreated to their vast data vaults and began running calculations. They analyzed every piece of information about the Prometheus Rising, searching for weaknesses, looking for ways to acquire the framework knowledge for themselves. Knowledge was their purpose. Knowledge was their God. And the greatest knowledge in the universe had just been revealed to someone else. The ancient Orith closed their borders and refused all contact. They knew what the framework could do. They remembered the price their ancestors had paid for touching it. Now they waited in silence, wondering if the galaxy would survive what was coming. Commander Lyra Chen found herself caught in the middle of everything. The Earth's government appointed her as the official liaison to the Prometheus Rising. It was a job she did not want and could not refuse. Every day she traveled between her station and the impossible ship, carrying messages and demands from species who could not agree on anything except their fear. She spent most of her time with Dr. Samuel Okonkwo, the chief physicist who had helped guide the colonists through their transformation. Samuel was patient and kind, but his eyes carried a sadness that never fully lifted. "Show me where you keep the knowledge," Lyra asked him one evening as they walked through the strange corridors of the ship. Samuel led her to a chamber deep in the heart of the vessel. The room was filled with crystalline structures that grew from the floor like frozen trees. Each crystal pulsed with soft light, and when Lyra looked closely, she could see symbols flowing beneath their surfaces. "We call these the archives," Samuel explained. "During our time in the framework, we grew these structures to store what we learned. Each crystal contains more information than every library in the known galaxy combined." Lyra reached out to touch one of the crystals, then stopped herself. "Is it safe?" "Safe enough to touch. Not safe enough to truly understand?" Samuel smiled sadly. The knowledge in these crystals could cure every disease. It could end every war. It could make every species immortal and perfect. Then why do you look so unhappy? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with memory. "Because we tried all of those things, Lyra. In the early years beyond the boundary, we thought we could fix everything. We cured our sick. We extended our lives. We removed our pain and fear and doubt. And some of us went further. They tried to become perfect. They tried to know everything. They tried to exist everywhere at once. 400 who were lost," Lyra said, remembering what he had told the delegation. "Yes, good people. Brilliant people. People I loved." Samuel's voice broke slightly. "They did not die in the way you understand death. They simply stopped being distinct. When you remove all limits, all boundaries, all definitions, you stop being a thing at all. You become part of everything, which means you become nothing that can think or feel or love. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. That sounds worse than death. In some ways, it is. Death ends a story. What happened to them erased the story completely. Even the memories of them grew fuzzy, as if reality itself was forgetting that they ever existed as individuals. They walked in silence through the crystal forest. Lyra thought about the alien fleets gathered outside, all of them demanding access to this power. Did they understand what they were asking for? The Valori want to quarantine Earth, she said finally. They say humanity is too dangerous now. They want to lock us away forever. Samuel nodded. We expected that. Fear makes people do foolish things, and the crystalline minds want to trade for the knowledge. They have offered entire planets, resources beyond counting. They see only the power. They do not see the price. What about the Orith? Lyra asked. They recognized what you had done. They said they touched the framework once before. Samuel stopped walking. He turned to face Lyra with an expression of deep respect. The Orith are the wisest of all species we have encountered. Millions of years ago, they did what we did. They crossed the boundary. They learned to read and write reality. And then they made a choice that still amazes me. What choice? They chose to forget. They buried the knowledge so deep that even they could not find it again. They deliberately made themselves less powerful because they understood that some abilities are too dangerous for any single species to hold. Lyra thought about this. The Orith were ancient beyond measure. They had seen more than any other beings in the galaxy, and they had decided that the power of the framework was not worth keeping. Do you think they made the right choice? She asked. Samuel smiled, but it was not a happy smile. I think they made the only choice they could make at the time. They were alone. No other species had touched the framework. If they kept the power, they would have been gods ruling over children. The temptation to control, to fix, to manage everything would have been too great. But you kept the power, Lyra pointed out. We did, because we are not alone. There are hundreds of intelligent species in the galaxy now. The Concord exists because everyone agreed that cooperation was better than conflict. We returned because we believe the decision about what to do with this knowledge should not belong to one species. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. Samuel looked toward the door with concern. The delegation is meeting again, he said. The Valori are pushing for a vote on what to do about us. I should be there. Lyra followed him back through the ship, her mind spinning with everything she had learned. The power to rewrite reality, the danger of losing yourself in infinity. The ancient Orith who had chosen forgetting over Godhood and her own species, standing at the center of it all, trying to decide what kind of future to build. As they reached the meeting hall, Lyra heard raised voices. The Valori ambassador was shouting about containment. The crystalline minds were arguing about rights to knowledge. Smaller species were demanding protection from changes. They did not understand. Captain Alina Vasquez stood at the center of the chaos, calm and patient as always. She caught Lyra's eye and nodded once, as if to say that everything was going according to plan. But Lyra was not sure what that plan was. She only knew that the galaxy was balanced on the edge of a knife, and the next few days would decide which way it fell. War or peace, fear or understanding, old ways or new possibilities. The weight of infinite pages pressed down on everyone in that room. None of them knew how the story would end. The Galactic Concord had stood for 100,000 years. It had survived wars and plagues and disasters that wiped out entire worlds. But nothing had ever threatened it like the return of the Prometheus Rising. 3 factions emerged in the days following the days. Demonstration of human power, the Valori led the first faction. Ambassador Kethver stood before the Concord Assembly and spoke words that echoed through every government in the galaxy. Humanity has become an existential threat, he declared. Not through evil intent, but through pure potential. What happens when a single angry human decides to rewrite the laws of physics? What happens when a human child throws a tantrum and accidentally erases a star? We cannot allow this power to exist unchecked. He proposed a complete quarantine of the Earth system. No ships, in or out. No communication, no trade. Humanity would be isolated until the Concord could decide on a permanent solution. Nearly half the species in the assembly supported this plan. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the Valori knew how to use it. The crystalline minds led the second faction. Prism 7 spoke with light patterns that translated into urgent words. Knowledge belongs to all thinking beings, Prism 7 argued. The framework is the ultimate understanding of reality itself. To lock it away, to pretend it does not exist, is a crime against the very nature of consciousness. We should not fear humanity. We should learn from them. We should share in what they have discovered. The crystalline minds offered an alliance with Earth. They would provide resources, protection, and political support. In exchange, they wanted access to the archives, to the crystals that contain knowledge beyond imagination. This faction was smaller than the first, but it included some of the most powerful species in the galaxy. The promise of ultimate knowledge was too tempting for beings who had spent millions of years seeking truth. But it was the third faction that surprised everyone. The Orth had remained silent through all the debates. Their elders sat in the shadows of the assembly chamber, watching with eyes that had seen the birth of stars. When they finally spoke, every voice fell silent. "We have kept a secret for longer than most species have existed," the elder said. "It is time to share it, though the sharing brings us shame." The assembly waited. Even the humans of the Prometheus Rising leaned forward to hear. Millions of years ago, we were like humanity is now, young, ambitious, hungry for knowledge. We crossed the boundary. We touched the framework. We learned to read and write the code of existence. Whispers swept through the assembly. The Orth, the most ancient and mysterious species in the galaxy, had possessed the same power that humanity now held. "We used that power," the elder continued. "We reshaped worlds. We created species. We ended wars by simply rewriting the combatants into peaceful beings. We thought we were doing good. We thought we were helping." The elder's voice grew heavy with old grief. "We were wrong. Every change we made had consequences we did not foresee. Species we modified lost their sense of purpose. Worlds we reshaped became dependent on our constant attention. We became gods, and our children became worshippers who could not think for themselves." Commander Lyra Chen felt her heart ache at the pain in the elder's words. This was not ancient history to the Orth. It was still a wound that had never fully healed. "In the end, we faced a choice," the elder said. "We could continue as gods, controlling everything, responsible for everything, unable to let reality evolve on its own. Or we could step back. We could forget. We could let the boundary remain unbroken and let other species find their own way." "You chose to forget," Alina said softly. "You buried the knowledge. You buried it so deep that even we cannot find it anymore. We allowed ourselves to diminish, to become the quiet watchers you know today. It was the hardest thing our species ever did." The assembly was silent. The Orth's confession changed everything. This was not about whether humanity should be trusted with ultimate power. This was about whether anyone could be trusted with it. Kethver spoke into the silence. "Then you agree with us. The knowledge is too dangerous. It should be locked away forever." "No," the elder replied. "We do not agree. We chose to forget because we were alone. There was no one to share the burden, no one to help us make wise decisions. Humanity is not alone. They have returned to a galaxy full of thinking beings, all of whom can participate in the choice." "You suggest we share the power?" Prism 7 asked, crystalline body flickering with eager light. "Teach everyone to touch the framework." "We suggest that the decision should not be made by fear," the elder said. "Not by Valori fear of human potential. Not by crystalline hunger for knowledge. Not even by Orth shame over past mistakes. The decision should be made by all of us together, with full understanding of what we are choosing." The factions stared at each other across the assembly chamber. Trust was in short supply. Old rivalries and new fears made cooperation seem impossible. Outside, the fleet still waited. Valori warships formed a blockade around the Earth system. Crystalline vessels scanned the Prometheus, rising with instruments designed to steal secrets. Smaller species huddled behind larger ones, hoping to survive whatever came next. Lyra found Elena standing alone on the observation deck of the great ship. The captain was watching the stars with an expression of profound sadness. "I thought returning would be the hard part," Elena said when Lyra joined her. "Cross the boundary, survive the framework, bring back what we learned. Simple compared to this." "They are afraid," Lyra said. "They should be. We are afraid too." Elena turned to look at her. "Do you know what kept us going during those centuries beyond the boundary? What stopped us from becoming like the Orth, alone with power too great to bear?" Lyra shook her head. "Hoped. We hoped that when we returned, we would find a galaxy ready to grow beyond its limits. Not a galaxy that wanted to bury its head in the sand and pretend the framework did not exist. The Valori will never agree to share power. They have ruled for too long, and we will not ask for their agreement." Lena's voice was calm but firm. "Tomorrow, we will address the entire Concord. We will make an offer that no species can refuse, and we will force them to choose what kind of galaxy they want to live in." "What offer?" Lyra asked. Elena smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she launched the Prometheus Rising 300 years ago. Bold, fearless, ready to change everything. "An offer that will terrify some and inspire others. An offer that will break the Concord apart or unite it in ways no one has imagined." She turned back to the stars, to the fleets and the fear and the ancient wounds that still bled. "Tomorrow, we will give them the choice they never knew they had. And whatever happens after that will depend on whether the galaxy is brave enough to accept it." Lyra stood beside her, watching the lights of 100 warships flicker in the darkness. War seemed certain. Peace seemed impossible. But she had learned something important during her time with these changed humans. Impossible was just a word, and words could be rewritten. Every ship in the galaxy capable of receiving a signal tuned to the same channel, every planet, every station, every outpost turned their attention to the Prometheus Rising. For one moment, the entire galaxy held its breath. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the deck of her impossible ship. Her crew of 12,000 gathered behind her, humans who had touched infinity and returned with wisdom instead of madness. Her granddaughter Mira stood at her side, a child born beyond existence, carrying power that no other being in the galaxy possessed. The alien fleet surrounded them. Valori warships with weapons charged, crystalline vessels humming with hungry curiosity, Orth observers watching with ancient, tired eyes, and countless smaller species caught between giants, hoping to survive whatever came next. "You fear what we have become," Elena began. Her voice was calm and carried across every frequency, reaching every ear and mind that listened. "You fear we will remake the universe in our image. You fear we will erase what we dislike and force our will upon reality itself." The silence that followed was so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. "You are right to fear it. We feared it too, every day beyond the boundary." Ambassador Kethfer leaned forward in his command chair. This was not what he expected. He expected threats, demands, demonstrations of power designed to force submission. He did not expect agreement. Elena continued. "For 300 years we debated what we should do if we ever returned. We knew the power we carried. We knew how it would look to species who had never touched the framework. Some of us argued we should keep it secret forever. Some argued we should use it to enforce peace across the galaxy. Some argued we should never return at all." On the crystalline mind vessel, Prism 7's body flickered with confused patterns. Where was the offer to share knowledge? Where was the negotiation for access to the archives? "But in the end, we rejected all of those options," Elena said, "because they all shared the same flaw. They all assumed that we had the right to decide for everyone else." The Orth Elder's eyes widened slightly. This was unexpected wisdom from such a young species. "Reality is not a kingdom waiting for a ruler," Elena continued. "It is not a machine waiting for an operator. It is not a book waiting for an author. Reality is a conversation. The framework does not empower one voice to silence all others. It enables all voices to speak." She reached out and took Mira's small hand in her own. "And we have decided that our first words will not be commands." Mira stepped forward. Her young face held a calm that seemed impossible for a child. She raised her free hand, and for a moment, the watching galaxy thought she would create something new, demonstrate her power once more. Instead, she did the opposite. She reached into the framework and pulled something out. Not a flower, or a star, or a miracle. She pulled out potential. She pulled out possibility. She pulled out the very ability to touch the code of existence, and she offered it. Outward, shimmering threads of light extended from her small hand. They reached toward every ship, every world, every thinking being in range. Each thread was an invitation. Each thread was a door. You can all learn this, Elena said. Not as a gift from humanity. Not as something you must earn or buy or steal. This is your birthright as conscious beings. The framework exists for everyone who wonders, everyone who dreams, everyone who asks questions about the nature of reality. Kethver stared at the thread of light floating toward his ship. His entire species had spent 100,000 years building an empire based on their supposed superiority. Now a human child was offering them something that would make all species equal in ways they had never imagined. This is a trick, he said. Though his voice lacked conviction, it is a choice, Elena replied. You can accept it or refuse it. We will not force understanding on anyone who does not want it, but we will not hoard it either. Gatekeeping is for those who fear others rising to their level. We are not gatekeepers. We are door openers. Prism 7 reached out first. The crystalline mind touched the thread of light, and knowledge flowed into their vast consciousness. They saw the framework for the first time, saw the code beneath reality, saw the infinite possibilities waiting to be explored. It is beautiful, Prism 7 whispered. More beautiful than any data we have ever collected. The Orith Elder reached out next. As the ancient being touched the thread, tears formed in eyes that had not wept for millions of years. They remembered. They remembered what it felt like to touch the infinite. They remembered the joy beneath the fear, the wonder beneath the responsibility. You have given us back what we chose to forget, the Elder said. And you have done it not to control us, but to free us. One by one, species across the galaxy reached for the threads of light. Some hesitated. Some refused. But most accepted, driven by curiosity or hope or simple wonder at what lay before them, Kethver was the last to decide. His hand trembled over the communication panel. His entire understanding of the galaxy was crumbling. Everything the Valori had built, everything they believed, was being rewritten in real time. If we take this power, he said slowly, we will all be equal. No species will rule over others. No empire will stand unchallenged. Yes, Elena agreed. That is exactly what we intend. The old ambassador closed his eyes. For 9,000 years, he had fought to maintain Valori dominance. For 9,000 years, he had believed that his species deserved to lead because they were stronger, wiser, better. But looking at the human child who held the power of existence in her small hands and chose to share it freely, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt ashamed, and then he felt hope. He reached out, touched the light. Commander Lyra. Chen watched from Vigil 7 as the galaxy transformed before her eyes. Species that had fought for millennia reached toward each other with new understanding. Borders that had stood for thousands of years began to dissolve. Fear that had poisoned relationships for generations started to fade. This is what humans do, she whispered to herself. We find the impossible door, and then we hold it open for everyone else. On the Prometheus Rising, Alina Vasquez held her granddaughter close. The crew around them wept and laughed and embraced. They had carried this burden for 3 centuries, wondering if they were making the right choice. Now they knew. What happens next? Mira asked her grandmother. Alina smiled. It was the first true smile she had worn since returning to the known universe. Whatever we choose, little one. All of us together. In the space around Earth, alien fleets lowered their weapons. Communication channels filled with wonder instead of threats. The boundary that surrounded the universe, that great wall of impossible energy, shimmered once. And for the first time in cosmic history, it began to expand. not because one species forced it open, not because one power conquered all others, but because a galaxy full of conscious beings finally had the same dream at the same moment. They dreamed of growing together in reality, which had always been listening, wrote their dream into truth. The Prometheus Rising had carried something more powerful than any weapon across the void of existence. It had carried an idea that the greatest power is not the ability to control others. It is the courage to set them free and humanity. That young and stubborn and endlessly hopeful species had proven that even the framework of reality could not contain what they truly were. They were door openers. They were bridge builders. They were the ones who looked at infinity and said, "There is room for everyone here." The ghost ship had come home. And it had not just changed the galaxy. It had helped the galaxy become what it was always. It's meant to be infinite, growing, free, together.